we threw money into the pool from the Land and Water Conservation Fund and decided at the landscape scale what the most important property to buy was. And then we would say, who's got the authority to buy that? And it was often the Forest Service or the Fish and Wildlife Service, because they can buy habitat, which the Park Service can't, not unless it's inside the park. And so we were looking at large landscape connectivity, and we were pooling our money, which was incredibly collaborative around that. We collaborated on the Every Kid in the Park Pass. We created that, and it was good in all the agencies. The Veterans Pass, the Active Duty Pass, a number of these kinds of things we looked for. And then we looked, more geographically to say, where can we really do something powerfully? So one of those areas was what's called the Blackfoot Challenge, which is in the sort of front range of the Rockies, Glacier South, that region. And we looked at that. That's been working for about 25 years to sort of create a conservation overlay with ranchers and fishermen and hunting and the timber industry and sustainable forestry and all of these things. And we said, for maybe about a $50 to $100 million investment, that part of the country will be ecologically sustainable forever. And we were all like, we're all in. We're all in. Let's throw whatever we've got into that and try to get it done. And then we said, okay, what's next? And so we were looking at the longleaf pine ecosystems of the southern United States or the California desert. And another good example is the Desert Renewable Energy Plan, the DRECP, which was to, smart from the start, locate new renewable energy areas away from national parks, out of wildlife corridors, and the like, because basically the sun shines equally over the whole landscape. Let's figure out where the best places are, and then as we push forward with renewables, the Trump administration has rescinded that plan, by the way. But the idea was to work collaboratively on these large landscapes. So, Michael.
What are your opinions on park entrance fees, and especially comparing entrance fees at bigger parks where they tend to be a little bit higher and smaller parks where they might be a little bit lower?
Yeah. Well, all those disabled veterans and elderly kids getting in free, it wouldn't be such a big problem. That was a Ryan Zinke quote from his congressional hearing, that he had to raise fees because all these people were getting in free. So let me put fees in perspective. So the Park Service has been collecting fees for 100 years. It was $5 to get in Mount Rainier in 1905. So it was expensive. When Congress created the first sort of modern fee legislation, they let us keep the money. But prior to that, it was just an offset. They gave us, we collected the money, went in the Treasury, and they reappropriated it. But now the fee money is retained by the agency. And at the local level, the collecting part gets to keep 80%. And 20% goes into a pool for the non-collecting parks. So just to give you a little structural. And so the Park Service, and I won't speak to the other agencies, we collect about $300 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, annually. The budget is $3 billion. Okay, so first of all, it's important, but it's not, you couldn't run the Park Service on fees, no matter how high you wanted to raise it. The second part is we've always intended to keep the fees low, way lower than probably market would bear, because the parks are for the people, and you do not want to financially suppress any segment of the American people. You want them to be inexpensive as a vacation and as a place to go. And then there are parks that can't collect fees for a variety of reasons. Some of it's legal, some of it's just operational, some of it's geographic. And so there are bands of, there are kind of no fee parks, there are small fee parks, there are middle fee parks, and then there's the cash cows up at the top that can collect a lot of fees on top of that. And so under the George W. Bush administration, they were increasing the fees every year. They were just ramping them up every year after year after year. And so when I came on as the director, I put a moratorium on increases. I just stopped it and said, we're pushing the public, we've pushed it as far as we can. I want to just stop it for now. I'll allow a few exceptions on a case by case. And we kept the fees at the same level pretty much the entire Obama administration. And we actually created some new passes that were free. The one pass that I really wanted to increase, and apologies to the elderly in the room, but was the Golden Age Pass, the senior pass. It was $10 for life.
Wow.
One time, $10.
That's a steal.
Right, and so I went to AARP and said, yeah, come on, so they agreed. They basically agreed not to object as we went to Congress and we increased it to equal the American Beautiful Pass, which is $80, but it's still one time. So you pay one time, $80. You have a pass for the rest of your life, and that raised $35 million right there in just that one act. $35 million annually to the Park Service. This proposal by the administration to do sort of a jack up during the summer, I think is a really bad idea. And I've said that in the press. It was poorly done, poorly thought out. It actually won't generate that much money because if you walk up to the gate at Yellowstone and it's been increased to $70, and for $80 you can buy a pass that would be good for the year in every national park in the entire country. Which are you going to buy, right? So all you're going to do is buy the American Beautiful Pass. And you can buy that online before you even go. So the delta there is only $10. And so the poor staff back there in Washington are trying to demonstrate that little mathematics to the leadership that this is a really boneheaded idea.
Thank you.
Does Destry still get to use his $10 pass, or does he have to buy 80?
Yeah.
I got mine at $10, so I got in. But if you missed the opportunity, it's $80 now.
Too late, huh?
It's still a deal. It's still a deal. Okay, any other students? Okay, back open then. You had a question.
I would like you to comment on the role of private individuals, nonprofit groups in preserving the parks or even in creating the parks, and also the economic benefits of parks.
Okay, so private individuals and organizations have always been the driving force in both the creation of and in probably its long-term preservation. That without that, it wouldn't happen. I remember talking to Ken Burns while he was working on his America's Best Idea film, and I asked him a question. I said, at what point when you were doing this film did you suddenly realize that this is a story about people rather than a story about parks? And he said that there was this blinding flash all of a sudden, that they just suddenly realized that every one of these parks has somebody's story behind it. Whether it's a George Dorr in Acadia or Rockefeller in the Tetons. They're just these individuals that just sort of doggedly pursued it to get it established, and then in some ways stayed with it over time. The Marjorie Stoneman Douglases of the Everglades and other parks. So that's incredibly important. And then that's sort of in many cases that they morph into the Friends organizations. And every park, not every park has one. I would say every park needs one. And frankly, they can be extraordinarily helpful politically, philanthropically, locally, in the park stewardship. And they can be great advisors they can be a pain in the ass too, but they can be great advisors to the park management, which I think is really, really important. And I've always loved my friends groups that I've worked with over the years. There is a Friends Alliance. There's the work by the National Park Foundation to help create new Friends groups and help build capacity for these Friends organizations to raise money. And there's a lot of money out there. We set the goal to raise a significant amount of philanthropic support for the Park Service during the centennial. We raised about $400 million of private funds to do projects in parks. So they're incredibly important.
Okay. And the economic benefits.
Oh, yeah, economic benefits. Okay, economics. So the standard economic model that we've been using for a long time, called the money generational model, it looks at predominantly visitor spending. It's pretty robust. It's been tested, a number of times. So the standard result is for every dollar expended within a national park unit, there is $4 into the local economy. And then when that cascades through the larger economy, it results in about $10 to the American economy. And so I always say parks are not an expense, they're an investment. And you can see it, go to Moab, Utah, or Estes Park, any of these gateway communities, and they are robust as a result of the presence of those parks, sometimes a little too robust in some cases. So we've been trying to make the economic argument for a long time. One of the projects that we worked on during my tenure is a new analysis of all the economic impacts, not just tourism, but ecosystem services, education. You'll love this one, the use of parks for movies. The opening scene in one of the Star Wars movies is, in Arches, and so parks are used for movie sets all across the country, of which we get basically nothing back on. And so Professor Linda Bilmes, who's a Harvard economist, has been writing a book on this. The book will be coming out next year. It's going to be called America's Best Investment, and it is going to do a full analysis. And the other thing that Linda did, along with Professor John Loomis at Colorado State University, is they did a survey of the American people on a willingness to pay. So it's a standard economic model. You go out and you ask the public, through a statistical analysis about the willingness to increase their taxes by a certain amount in order for something to persist. And basically that's what they did for the national parks. And they even parsed it like, how much would you allow your taxes to go up to save 20% of the national parks, or 50%, or the entire national parks? The bottom line is that across all economic sectors, the American people would be willing to let their taxes increase as much as $400 per household to protect the national parks. Currently, they pay 1/10 of 1 cent of their taxes go to the protection of the national parks. I like that delta. I would always hope for a checkoff on your 1040, but we'll never get there. So, you had a question.
When you were speaking about the need to break out of the silo, you mentioned a few different things, and one was historic preservation. And since the Park Service is, of course, tasked with protecting not only natural resources, but cultural resources, just wondering if you could speak a little bit to the role of cultural resources and historic preservation in conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of our historians once said that a bison is a natural resource and a buffalo is a cultural resource. I think we have to look at these places with both lenses. That humans have been a part of the environment. They're not separate. This is a little bit of a Western kind of thing where we tend to look at ourselves as somewhat separate from the environment. But all of the cultural constructs, the historical narratives, the places have a natural component to them, and vice versa as well. And I think bridging these two, which have somewhat historically been separate from each other, are really, really important. And I've seen some really great stuff like the Hope Cruise, the historic preservation crews that have been established where kids are going out and working on historic preservation projects as a way to connect to history, to connect to nature, to build skill sets. Urban archaeology, going into urban environments and creating and building their story within these urban spaces as well. And really creating as much crossover between the two narratives. And to frankly stop fighting over little fights like preserving fire lookouts in wilderness, which some of the hardcore conservation side have been suing over the Forest Service over trying to preserve some of these historic structures. And I think it's an incredible waste of time and energy between two organizations should have much more common ground.
I'll ask another if I can.
Okay.
I think one of your great personal victories as director was the Drake Cicero oyster battle. I think you took a lot of heat over that from all sorts of directions. I wonder now that it's past us, do you have any reflections on how it's worked out for the resource and what happened to the oyster business there?
We speak to this story actually in this book. It's actually in the very end chapter, and I'll end with just one little reading out of this. But so just as a quick background, so just Point Reyes National Seashore, there is an estuary with using the Spanish name Estero, that is a gorgeous, stunningly beautiful resource that had an oyster farm in the middle of it. And the oyster farm predated the Park Service. It had been there probably 75, 80 years. So when Point Reyes was established, there were dairy farms on the land and this oyster farm in the estuary. The dairy farms were considered part of the sort of cultural landscape and have been retained, and they're still operating dairy farms. The oyster farm was viewed as a bit of an anomaly and had significant impact to the estuary. So we bought it. The Park Service bought it, but gave the operator a long-term but term estate that it would terminate, and then ultimately be converted to one of the only marine wilderness areas we have on the West Coast. It turned into a nasty political fight. The owner sold to a local rancher, and he decided he's not going anywhere, and he's not going, and he rallied the political forces of Congress and local politicians and the ag community, and he got backing from the Koch brothers to hire a lobbyist in DC, and they went after me personally and politically. I was investigated by the IG multiple times on this process. I was dragged before congressional hearings. They personally attacked the scientists to the point that several of them had to hire their own personal attorneys. They called for the removal of the park superintendent. It legally went all the way to the Supreme Court, of which the Supreme Court denied cert, was referred back to the lower court, and the lower court said settle, and so we settled with the oyster farm just walking away, and so they walked away, though I provided relocation services to all of his workers and providing them homes and funds for relocation. And then, but they left behind about 5 tons of debris in the estuary, of treated wood, plastics, metal, trash, all kinds of netting, a whole variety of junk in the estuary, plus all of their buildings and their processing plant. And we spent about $5 million removing all of that and cleaning it up. And so the estuary is now restored, and the harbor seals are back in there. And so I hadn't planned to do this, but I'll just read you this last little paragraph in here. It says, well, every conservation struggle is unique. The commonality among the most difficult conflicts is that success involves dedicated organizations that thoughtfully and fearlessly advance conservation in ways that are intentional, intelligent, forceful, and relentless, incorporating many of the strategies we have described in this book. Yet individuals are often the true heroes of conservation. In the struggle over the future of Drake's Estero, Amy Traynor, a young and dedicated conservationist, was one of those individuals. Her persistent push, her quick but smart responses to every angle of attack, her perseverance stand as a model for future conservationists. She navigated some very rough water with strategic intention, and Drake's Estero, the nation, and future generations are the beneficiaries. In 2016, the year of the centennial and election, on one of our low sandbars in Drake's Estero, a harbor seal hauled out with her pup. For the first time in almost 100 years, a harbor seal sunned undisturbed by motorboats run by oyster farmers. She does not know why it's so quiet, but we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Books out here, and if you purchase one, I'll be happy to sign it for you. So, and I'm also tomorrow, I'm at the college bookstore, starting at about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and downtown at the Berg, and I'll be doing signings there as well. So tell your friends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.